So now that we've had our introductory sessions around the nature of Makom and the impact that Makom has on us as people, so now we're going to move forward into the world of the relationship of Makom to prayer. And it's a very profound one. In fact, both major sources which talk about our ability to be still, to be in place, relate that to prayer. The first one is one which we've explored, and that is that Kol hakovea makom letfilato Elohei Avraham be'ezro, the God of Abraham is his help, and then goes on to say, and when this person leaves the world, people say about him, hey Anav, hey Hasid, what an Anav this person was, what a Hasid this person was. So we explored together the nature of becoming a Hasid and an Anav by virtue of being connected to Makom. But the context of that statement is that when a person comes to know the kvi'ah of Makom, is able to set himself, set herself in place. So that has to do with prayer. They're being kovea makom letfilah. The same kind of phenomenon and relationship is set up with Makom and Tefillah in the Mishnah, which talks about the Shohim. That the Chasidim Harishonim Hayu Shohim Sha'a Achat Umechavnim et Libam Lamakom Umitpalalim. They would pause, be, Shoheh is actually kind of a waiting, which appears in the Chumash with Eliezer when he's looking for the wife for Yitzchak, Mishtaheh, he's like waiting. And that waiting, or that pausing, would be given an hour by the Hasidim Rishonim. And we'll get back to talking about that in a moment. But what would happen by virtue of that waiting was they would be mechavein libam lamakom. They would attune, and we're going to explore that word also, their hearts to Makom, umit palalim, and then they would pray. So first of all, I just want to point out how both of these passages which talk about Makom relate Makom to prayer, being kovea Makom letfilah, and also being shoheh and directing one's heart towards place and then praying. So first of all, this is a very special aspect of Jewish meditation, that it's actually part of our preparation to prayer, because somehow in connecting to Makom, we get more connected to the divine origin of our universe, one, and second, we get more aligned with HaKadosh Baruch Hu as an actor, as someone, so to speak, who wants to give us, who wants to help us grow, who wants to move creation ahead, which is interesting because we're talking about coming into stillness and we're turning to Hashem to create movement and changing things, which is what prayer really is asking for. So these are phenomena which we're going to be exploring now, and by that, getting us ready for prayer through Makom. So first, let's relate to this sense of Makom actually becoming that which connects us to the divine. So there's various ways of looking at that. One is the simplest one, which is that Chazal actually say the word Makom is referring to Mekomo Shel Olam, the place for the world. But there's a deep sense of that, and that has to do with how all of creation is really being supported by HaKadosh Baruch Hu's simple being, that He is giving everything life and existence by virtue of His, in a sense, simple presence. That itself is providing the ground for the specific existences which we live. So that everything is really rooted in, coming out of, being an expression of that very basic being in presence, which is the divine being in presence. So I hope that doesn't sound too highfalutin. It's really kind of a simple idea that when we would get rid of or let ourselves let go of, I'm going to use a word which is, I don't mean it to be derogatory, but sort of the clutter of all of the different things, and just get to the basic presence which stands behind them, providing them with the basic level of existence. So then we're getting in touch with the divine in that way. Now, I want to be careful here with you that we're not being at all derogatory about all of this clutter, right? Because it's the great gift which God has given us, including our own separate existence. And Jewish meditation is not about getting away from the specifics. It's about reconnecting with the root of them and then coming back to them with a greater sense of their preciousness and dearness. So I want to make that clear, because that is very important, because from there we're going to be praying for all of these things, right, which we've kind of stepped back from. We're going to be praying that someone who we care about become healthy. We're going to be praying that there be more wealth and more abundance in the world. We'll be praying that we have greater wisdom to understand. I mean, those prayers are very personally oriented, personally in the sense both of you as a person and personally in the sense of, we're talking about people, we're talking about this planet, we're talking about the things that populate this planet, So we're not moving into the quiet and simple presence of being in order to, I'll put it bluntly, in order to say about all of this that it's some kind of an illusion. Not at all. It's in order for us to connect back to the source for it, who appreciated and desired so much that it should be, that we're able to turn to him and call to Hashem that he give it more existence, give it a more perfect realization, a more blessed actualization. You get that? We're going back to that original impulse and desire of Hashem that there should be something at all. So here's how then aligning ourselves with Hashem as Makom shel Olam, by becoming quieted and becoming present, actually serves the path of prayer. Even though it's a little ironic, I understand that. It's a little ironic because it would be like, wow, I'm just going back into that quiet before there was anything. Let me just stay there because it is so pleasurable and so blissful. And here, perhaps it was that way for God too. I mean, he got himself into a lot of tough things when he created this world and has to deal with us and deal with all of our errors and mistakes and evil. And oh my gosh, I mean, just stay blissful, God. I mean, nevertheless, as an act of love, he created all of this. So also as an act of love, we also step away from that blissful quietude and ask for Hashem to give greater growth and development to his world. So we're actually connecting to that very first impulse, desire of the divine to make this world, when we first establish place, Makom, and align ourselves with place, and then begin to pray. Yeah, so that's an important point, and it's an important point in life, which in other classes we'll explore how Makom is really the beginning point for all activity. But for now, I want us just to relate to it in terms of tefillah, in terms of prayer. Another thing which is very profound here is that the Mishnah about Shohim tells us that they were mechavein et libam lamakom umitpalalim. This word mechavein. So mechavein means to intend something, right? So they're intentionally orienting themselves toward their hearts towards place. There's something of an intentionality about it, right? Yeah. So that's something to point out, because when you're shoheh, So you need to actually sort of turn towards in a certain way, and we'll talk about that in the meditation. And the second thing about mechavein, which is really important, is that it's got beautiful overtones to it, right? If you want to be mechavein your musical instrument, so to tune it, to make it attuned to the right frequency, that's also called lechavein. So we're actually attuning ourselves. And another aspect of lechavein is directing and aligning ourselves. If you want to say, be mechavein my two hands, so I'm going to align them in a certain way, right? So that they're made appropriate to each other. That's like all in that word lechavein. I want to point out what's not in that word lechavein is to pay attention to the words you're reading. I don't think that that's so implied there. Certainly not in this Mishnah. And the Rambam, in his halachot of prayer, actually talks about the nature of kavanah based on this Mishnah, where he says that a person before he prays needs to empty his heart of thoughts and see him or herself standing in front of the Shekhinah. Empty my heart of thoughts first. That's very interesting. And he's consistent about that, and in his interpretation of this Mishnah about Shohim, he actually says that they would shoheh sha'a achat ad sheshavtu machshavoteihem, until their thoughts were quieted. That's interesting on a number of accounts. First of all, he's talking about thoughts dissipating so that you can just be simply present to life, to presence, to existence without thinking about other things, which would take one away from just being here. And the other thing which I find very interesting about it is the Rambam is telling us really that hour has a certain purpose to it. It's not just you have to sit an hour. It's rather that hour leads to a certain result. And I would suggest that the Rambam takes that to also mean that if it happens in less than an hour, so that's fine too. The hour there is really a way for us to know that there's a certain purpose that these Hasidim had in mind. Okay, so this then becomes halacha lamaisa according to the Rambam as the definition of what kavana is. That's important to know because if you're not doing that, the Rambam goes on and says, then you're not praying. If you're not doing that, if you don't see yourself standing in front of the Shekhinah, which is apparently accomplished by virtue of this being mechavenet halev lamakom, then you can't pray. Literally, the Rambam says that, and that's pretty essential, right? There are other halachic authorities, obviously, which those of you who are involved in halacha are probably more familiar with, that kavana means paying attention to the words, etc. That is not the way it is in the Rambam. And so that if you want to align yourself, you need to be willing to spend that time first, allowing those thoughts to dissipate. And it's not about quieting the thoughts. He doesn't use that language. That's a language which appears in certain writings. I know, hashkata it's called. I don't think that's what we're talking about here. Really, you're not quieting your thoughts. You're presencing yourself by being mechavein your leiv lamakom, and by virtue of that, your thoughts begin to disappear. They begin to quiet. They begin to dissipate. Okay, this is something which I hope you'll and have been realizing in your own meditative work. But that's what the Rambam here is talking about. I just want to say that this goes so far in his interpretation that he says, I want to point out that this goes so far in the Rambam's interpretation that he says that the early practitioners of prayer, the Kadmonim, would not pray for 3 days after they've been on a trip. I mean, my gosh, imagine that. So, like, you have to be so able to be mechavein your leiv lamakom that if you've been moving around too much, you're not going to be able to do that. I'm like, what does that say for us? I mean, we're always in the car and moving from place to place. So we've got an even greater challenge. I don't think it's a reason for us to give up on this, but it's definitely something that it's worth noting. So In the meditation, we're going to begin a very subtle beginnings of an orientation towards prayer by virtue of being mechavein et halev lamakom. So I look forward to seeing you with me in that meditation. So this has been an exploration of the wisdom of a particular aspect of what we're exploring. Now we want to be able to bring this into our hearts, to bring it into our being, to actually be transformed by it. And that's something which happens by virtue of hitbonenut ruchanit, of this meditative process and practices that I'm going to be teaching. And so if you'd like to join me for that, so press the link which is down in the description of this video or is appearing now on the screen. Just press on that and you'll be able to move right over to where we'll be practicing the meditative work. I'll see you there.